Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking part 2 of the Ultimate Spider-Man episode, Blade and the Howling Commandos. Overall, I thought this was a surprisingly fun episode. I was kind of meh on the last episode, but this one actually, in the second half, really kind of turned it around and became just a good old-fashioned, big, crazy fun that really ultimately made it a nice episode. Now, just kind of getting into some of the details that I noticed. I definitely enjoyed seeing Spider-Man referred to the viewers as true believers. Of course, this is one of the hallmarks of his co-creator, Stan Lee, co-creator basically of most of the Marvel universe. So that was certainly a nice nod there, and it was nice that they led into this episode with a riff on the old Marvel horror comics from the 70s, from which these episodes draw so very much. Now, in my last review, I talked about how in the comics, Werewolf by Night is actually a really big jerk, and I was sort of curious as to see if he was going to be like that here in the show. And of course the answer is, well, no, he isn't. In fact, Jack Russell, aka Werewolf by Night, seems to actually be a pretty nice guy. And, yeah, I don't really have a huge opinion about that one way or the other. I haven't read too many comics with Werewolf by Night in them. In fact, I think it's pretty much limited to Marvel Zombies 4 and the Frankencastle issues of The Punisher, if I remember correctly. But frankly, Marvel Zombies 4 pretty much stunk on ice, so I'm not really going to complain about them not keeping true to that. Oh boy, did that miniseries suck. Anyway, now, the character who was also radically different that I'm not so happy about was Living Mummy. Him I only know from the Punisher comics, and there he was presented as a reasonable and nice person. Now here on the show, he seems to have gotten his powers amped up. I don't recall seeing him do magic in the comics that I read. And here, of course, he ultimately turns on the good guys and becomes a villain. Which, as I said, in the comics, he's actually a pretty nice and reasonable person. And frankly, when they threw that at us, I was a little skeptical of it. But as I said, it just ultimately turned into big fun. I mean, it ultimately ended up with a giant pharaoh and a giant swamp monster battling out in the middle of New York City. I mean, that's a kaiju battle certainly worthy of the old Godzilla movies, which of course were referenced when they talked about the heroic turtle and moth coming to save humanity. Of course, these being references to Gamera and Mothra. I had a buddy in college who was big into those movies, so I learned a little bit about these things from him. Frankly, I've seen a few of the old Godzilla movies, and they're just not for me. Let me see here. Now, going back to other good points in this episode, I really did like that Spider-Man was able to figure out, just by the way they interacted, that Blade and Jack had been teammates at one point. It's always sort of nice when they throw in a nod to the fact that Spider-Man is actually a pretty smart guy, and not just in terms of science. He actually does have a reasonably good understanding of people, and he can really rise to the occasion and bring people together. I mean, Jack even kind of pokes fun at him a little bit by asking if he has anything more to bring to the table than good speeches, and of course Spider-Man does. I mean, we do forget often, and I think even the people that created the show often forget, that Nick Fury chose Spider-Man to lead the Amazing Friends. I know it's been a long time since I referred to them as that, because he saw leadership potential in Peter. And, well, you've heard me lament about the inconsistency of the show in that regard, so I don't think there's any point in rehashing that. But going back to the conflict between Jack and Blade, well, one thing I like there is if you stop and think about it, you realize that was a conflict between a werewolf and a vampire in a somewhat metaphoric sense. Werewolves versus vampires. Quite the popular motif in modern horror fiction. And of course, this all leads us to the guest appearance by Man-Thing, and he was even referred to as Giant Size Man-Thing, which is the name of the comic book, I believe, in which he first appeared, and is also probably the most unintentionally dirty title to ever grace the cover of an American comic book. I mean, yeah. I mean, it is pretty much impossible to say giant size Man-Thing with a straight face for reasons that are obvious, but that I'm not going to go into. We do try to keep things clean around here, especially on the programs that I review that are targeted for the younger audience. Now, one complaint that I do have about the fight at the castle is just how overplayed is this castle whose interior looks like that famous painting by M.C. Escher. I mean, I'm pretty sure they did that in Harry Potter, they did it here, it's been done 100 other places, and honestly, I'm just a little bit tired of it. And, well, I think that kind of really exhausts everything I had to say about it. I mean, the big fight at the end of this episode was really cool. It was lots of fun. And we certainly did get to see Spider-Man make a great speech. You know, some nice moments between him and the Howling Commandos. And things are set up that, it wouldn't surprise me if they brought these guys back again another time. Now, there's enough characters from the horror side of the Marvel Universe that if they decide to do something Halloween-wise next year, well, they certainly have a lot to choose from. Now, I've already mentioned the Marvel Zombies, but I have to say, them, I actually would kind of like to see. The sequels kind of sucked, but the original Marvel Zombies miniseries by Robert Kirkman, co-creator of The Walking Dead, was actually pretty good and genuinely, honestly creepy at points. I mean, there were a few, like, really? Are you kidding me moments? But overall, it was actually a pretty solid story and quite enjoyable one. I mean, the sequels pretty much universally sucked, but still. On the other hand, cannibalistic zombies, not always the best fit for children's fare, especially on a Disney Channel. But you never know. I mean, hey, we got Werewolf by Night and The Living Mummy and Man-Thing on this show. I'm pretty sure that that's not the last really crazy thing we'll see on Ultimate Spider-Man, so hey, you never know. Anyway, guys, that's all I got for you this time around. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Till next time, take care and have a good one.